By the way, this image was generated using artificial intelligence, using Midjourney, like 100% AI generated. I was a prompt around like blockchain and frontier and so forth. So I think it's pretty cool. Ooh. All right, this is what we're going to talk about today. All right, so just super quick about me. I didn't hack BTCE, but I did learn some very strong self-custody lessons from Mt. Gox and BTCE, which were a little painful, but now I have lots of hardware wallets, never doing that again. During the ICO craze of 2018, I founded a startup which was going to have its own token launch and following the gold rush a little bit there. I have my own trading bot written in Scala, which is trading like right now on Bitfinex. It's okay. I'm also a street photographer, so that's not me. It's one of my images that I've taken. I've published my work as NFT. No one's bought any yet, but if you're interested, let me know. And yeah, probably most meaningful is I work for BCG Digital Ventures, and involved in quite a few blockchain initiatives. Okay, so who is BCG Digital Ventures? So basically, we're company builders. We work with corporate clients, Fortune 1000 clients. We use their assets, so data and so forth, and we apply a startup mentality to creating new companies. And we also help them to think like venture capitalists. So we have a pretty strong focus on artificial intelligence, IoT, and of course, blockchain. All right, so we've been in business for around 7 to 8 years, launched quite a few businesses. There are quite a few of us around the world. Around 10% of our vertical ventures have been valued at over $100 million. So we've done okay for a few of those different companies that we've launched. Okay, so what should I build next? I'm not actually going to tell you what to build next, but I think, like oftentimes we get like really excited about like, hey, let's go build this awesome startup. We're very focused on tech. We want to launch things, but often focusing on the right solution for the right use case can help reduce some of that, churn in terms of like, are we focusing on the right things? So just giving you, a few examples like from different industries. These are the top use cases that we see by industry. So I'll let you digest that a little bit. But I think, for example, let's see, under financial institutions, the tokenization of physical assets. So you can, obviously tokenize them, put them on chain. It can support like fractionalized asset trading. In terms of payment automation, we can support like cross-border payments and so forth. So there's a lot of different use cases here. Just like to call out the consumer goods provenance use case there. So that's actually a pretty big one, and we'll talk through like what that means today as well. And just to kind of explain the linear versus the network effects, the icons up there. So linear is basically every time you do a transaction, you get a fixed amount of value. But obviously with network effects businesses, when you have, say, each additional participant is going to increase the value of your network exponentially. So think about TikTok, Facebook, the telephone. Having 2 participants is obviously not much value, but the more you have, the more important that value return is. A few more industries here. So if we look at end-to-end status tracking, doing real-time cross-trade, real-time cross-border trade there is a good use case. On the public sector, compliance, essentially if all the transactions are on the blockchain, then auditors are able to automate that auditing and do auditing on a continuous basis instead of once at the end of a year. Cool. And ID and credentialing is a pretty big use case too. So especially in terms of health, industry, insurance, and the public sector. And we'll talk through a use case there today. All right, so first we'll talk about provenance use cases. All right, so I'm just going to give you a bit of an example here. So imagine you have a girlfriend. You've been together for a number of years. You probably should be proposing now. So it's what you do. You pluck up the courage. You find this really, really out of the way jewelry store, and you get a super, super good deal on a diamond. You're really excited. You pop the questions. She's really excited. It's a win-win. You pull the ring out. You put it on her finger, and she's like super happy. Everyone's happy, and then she turns to you and says, "This is not a blood diamond, is it?" And you say, no, of course not. I've seen the movie with Leonardo DiCaprio. You pull out this certificate. You're like, see, it's not a blood diamond. She says, but that's just a piece of paper. I could have printed that on my own computer. And after about 10 minutes of debate, talking about the Kimberley process, how manual processes have holes in them, how paper can be faked, you walk out and you wonder, like, what went wrong? So you get home, you flip open your laptop, you do some research, and after a couple of hours, you realize that blockchain could have saved your relationship. It's obviously a bit of a far-fetched story, but you kind of get the idea. So we started this venture with De Beers, who's the largest blockchain mining, they're not a blockchain miner, they're a diamond mining company in the world. And they actually received like a lot of pressure from consumers, like in situations that we just described. Like people have these very important rings. They wanted to make sure that it wasn't used to fund war criminals or children weren't enslaved to mine these diamonds. Okay. All right. So, what are some of the challenges in the diamond industry? Again, like a lot of this is related to being able to track the diamond throughout the supply chain. And there was an effort to kind of solve for this in the past. It was called the Kimberley process, and it did have an impact, but still a lot of diamonds that were conflict diamonds still made their way through the supply chain. And some of the problems there are that diamonds have to go through 8 to 10 different groups. It's hard to trace a diamond after it's been cut. Like even an expert can't tell you came from this mine or that mine, for example. And those provenance cases only applied to the rough diamonds. So if you're not tracing it fully end to end, then how do you know that a batch of diamonds hasn't been mixed, with another batch of diamonds? And of course, paper can be faked quite easily. So Tracer solves this problem by tracking that diamond throughout every step of its production. And it uses digital certificates, images, and it tracks all of that history on the blockchain. So what it does is it increases the value of legitimate diamonds and also makes sure that those diamond miners who are doing the right thing will actually get paid a fair value. So we have a short video.
There are many ways the platform can be used to unlock significant value for the industry. For example, the digital certificate, a historical ledger of the diamond from mine to finger. Here, we observe the creation of a rough diamond as information is fed in from the existing data system. While the diamond is in the possession of a producer, they provide additional information about the diamond in the form of images and planning files. This enables both the digital and physical fingerprinting of the diamond. Here, we see the encrypted files being stored as part of this digital certificate. Once the diamonds are polished and graded, the digital certificate is updated with additional information, such as grading certificates and images of the polished diamond. The diamonds are now ready for sale, and the updated digital certificate shows a complete story from rough to polished, including key details about the diamond's history. The digital certificates can now be shared with retailers and other potential buyers who can purchase and sell these diamonds with trust and confidence, knowing their stories are backed by the blockchain. This new platform delivers a tamper-proof digital diamond register for the industry through blockchain technology. Through encrypted storage of primary and secondary data, digital fingerprinting, privacy controls to protect sensitive data, and intelligent identity management, diamonds can now be tracked with an immutable link across the value chain. The result is an undeniable authenticity, traceability, and accountability within the industry.
Okay, and how's it going? This initiative was launched at scale just a few months ago. Awesome. So our second provenance use case is OpenSC, which stands for Open Supply Chain. And like so this one was done in partnership with the World Wildlife Fund. So it's the WWF, it's the largest conservation organization in the world. And again, aside from a lot of the ethical challenges that it helps solve for, consumers really want to know that their food was created in a sustainable, ethical manner. And of course, we're putting all this food into our bodies, right? So many of us care where our food actually came from. Okay, so like the diamond challenges, there are many, I guess, human elements to this as well. So there are 40 million people who are in slavery today as a result of our food production. The WWF has been kind of tracking wildlife over a number of years, and they've found that over the last 50 years, the number of wildlife in existence has been reduced by 68%. And if we drill into that number a little bit, around 70% of that is caused by the supply of 9 commodities, so seafood, sugar, beef, and cotton. And of course, being able to track this appropriately, you need the correct data to support it. Of course, technology is what comes to our rescue again. So we use data capture using RFIDs, and because these are very cheap now, around 5 cents each, we're able to put an RFID on, say, a pellet of wheat and track it all the way through the supply chain. So data is stored on the interplanetary file system, as well as a hash of the log stored on Ethereum, and we have APIs which allow for consumption of data off-chain. So if you think about an example of this, so one of the companies using this is Nespresso, create the coffee pods. So they're able to trace a bag of coffee from a farmer all the way through the different stages, so that as a consumer, when you buy that sleeve of coffee pods, there's a QR code on that sleeve, and you can actually scan it and see the entire journey that your coffee's gone through. One of the other outputs of this is that farmers are actually getting paid fairly as well, the ones who are doing the right thing. And we also use artificial intelligence to apply different image recognition techniques on satellites, and making sure fishing is done in the right areas, and deforestation is not occurring. Okay, so the impact. This initiative has been applied to milk, it's been applied to fish, it's been applied to coffee. It's a whole lot of products, and is in market today. Okay, so our next and last provenance use case relates to the art venture, or to the art world. So provenance has actually been around in art for a long time. So being able to know where a piece of art was created, who created it, and the different hands that it's gone through is very much tied to the value and authenticity of a piece of art. So let's just take an example. So this beautiful Gustav Klimt image here. So imagine somehow that came into your hands. Maybe a rich uncle donated it to you. Maybe you started mining Bitcoin in 2010. So however it got into your hands, you now have this beautiful piece of art. And you keep it, you enjoy it for a number of years. You give it to your daughter as an inheritance. So you're dead, you're finished. And she's like, you know what, Dad, I don't like my father's taste in artwork. I want to sell this piece of art. So she puts it up for auction at an art auction, and the organizers do some research, and then they trace the art. And unfortunately, it turns out that it was looted from a family during World War II. There's all this media, people are talking about it, and so the only kind of face-saving recourse she has is to give it back to the family. This actually did happen to another Gustav Klimt, not this one, image called Rose Bushes Under the Trees. So that piece of art was returned to the family. So with provenance, it helps you to realize the true value of a piece of art, but also make sure that you're not going to buy some stolen art. So this venture helps to support that. It also is applying a perpetual equity model to physical art. So I'm sure like a few of you are familiar with the equity model for NFTs. So the artists will continue to be rewarded after each sale, like could be up to 10% of each subsequent sale of an NFT. So applying the same sort of thinking to physical art so that the artist continues to get rewarded. And this venture is being built with two of the biggest names in the art world and BCG Digital Ventures, and it will be coming soon this year. Okay, so last kind of area that we'll talk through is self-sovereign identity, one use case here. I'm not going to talk too much about the why, but I think there are a lot of reasons, but I think I'll just say that if you're not the sovereign of your own identity, then someone else is, be it a random website or Facebook or Google or whoever is going to be the sovereign of your identity, which means they can control your data, they can track you and do all sorts of things. Okay, so just a super brief overview of how self-sovereign identity works. So in that bottom corner there, you have an issuer. Usually that's an organization, could be like a government, who knows something about you and can attest to that attribute about your identity. So let's just use an example. Say it's a college. Let's just use MIT. It's obviously where a lot of, you can get a very, very strong computer science degree from this college in the US. So assume that the holder is someone who holds a credential. So perhaps that's you. As a previous student to MIT, you have this degree in computer science. So MIT can issue you a credential to say, yes, you have this degree. And a verifier is someone who wants to verify that that credential exists and that it's true. So say you as the person with this degree from MIT, you want to go join this like really cool tech startup. You get along well, they want you, you want them, and they say, all right, we just need to prove that you have this degree from MIT. And maybe during your college years, like you partied a little bit too hard, you had to repeat a couple of subjects, maybe halfway through you took a year off to find yourself, something like that. You don't necessarily want your new employer to have all of the transcript of all these dates. So instead of giving them the paper transcript, which would have all this information, you could use this verifiable credential, which can basically just give them the information that, yes, you have this degree. And this is done through a zero knowledge proof. So instead of giving them all those details, it's just the, yes, this person has a degree. So the tech startup can verify the credential by using the public signature of MIT to validate it. Okay, so just talking about this last venture, it's actually in three parts. So it's the standing up of an SSI, self-sovereign identity platform, and then the two businesses that operate on it. So the client in this case was a sovereign wealth fund with hundreds of billions of dollars in assets under management. And I know in SSI we talk a lot about infrastructure, but today we're going to focus more on the solutions and the value proposition. Okay, so to make an SSI platform viable, you need to have issuers, our MIT example before, and you also need applications that will operate a use case on that platform. So in order to stand up the platform, you need to be able to attract issuers and applications, and then hopefully you'll start to attract users after that. So in our context today, the applications are basically businesses that will stand up the system, the user experience, they'll stand up business operations and so forth, and they'll enable these participants to operate on the SSI platform. And they'll actually pay a fee to the network itself and also to the issuers. So at Digital Ventures, we think a lot about how to engage with people and like what's in it for them, and like how do we kind of get to that heart of the value proposition for them. So I'm just going to talk through a little bit around the questions that we asked ourselves and then issuers and applications to understand like what's going to be interesting for them. So from an issuer's perspective, they're obviously giving up access to their data, which is highly valuable, and typically they want to monetize it in some way. and that could be through a revenue share of usage of those credentials. But there's also other value opportunities for these issuers. So say you're a government, you might not care about the money so much, but you may care about other things like having a tamper-proof credential, say compared to like a paper credential. So think about an election, a paper credential is quite easy to fake. Well, it depends on where you are, but it's much harder than a digital token. So from them, it may be more advantageous to reduce election fraud than the amount of money they make from it. So it's really important to zero in on what's important for your issuers, as with applications too. So some of these key questions are what we need to ask ourselves to find out, like, what's a good application for the network? So again, you have to understand their value proposition, so what's in it for them. So often applications will be interested in the users that they get access to, and also we have to understand how they're going to monetize this platform for their business. And of course, the willingness to pay. So in this scenario, they're our customers. How much are they going to pay for access to the credentials and the underlying network and so forth? Okay, so we get through this understanding through, as we mentioned, like a lot of direct engagement. So to kickstart this platform off, we built two businesses. The first was a marketplace for seasonal workers. So the context here are that workers, they're blue-collar workers in a developing country, and a lot of them don't have any background documented. A lot of the work is found through word of mouth. So there's no like LinkedIn for the guy who's going to fix your tractor for 1 month a year kind of thing. And on the employer's side, they often will find workers who say they have a skill, but it's not really the case. And also, unfortunately, in this environment, some workers do get exploited as well. So just looking at our triangle again, in this scenario, so the business application that we stood up, who created the marketplace, they're actually the issuer as well. So they went through a process of using external services to identify the identity of the worker, as well as manually verifying their background. So they would call job references and like previous people they worked with and so forth to kind of validate before they would issue that credential. And then the worker, when they apply for the job, they are able to select who they can share that information with. And on the employer side, obviously, they get access to this whole set of verified workers. All right, so just kind of running through and giving you some insight into how we choose features. So I think a lot of times the mindset is let's go out and just build a bunch of stuff. But what we do at Digital Ventures is that we apply a fairly rigorous approach to de-risking how we choose those features. So in this case, like we ran a bunch of online ads to try and see which value proposition ranked highest with workers and employers. And everything in this scenario was tied to trust and verified data. So on the worker, references and having their references and experience validated, because they couldn't do this before. That was like highly valuable. And on the employer side, having those verified workers was very powerful too. Okay, so the second application that we stood up that uses the SSI platform was an international marketplace for small to medium enterprises. So typically, these are companies that do around $2 to $20 million in revenue. So the scenario is, just think about it, that if you're in Korea, maybe you make headphones and you need to buy a part from a manufacturer in Thailand, maybe for a speaker component. You think it looks like a good deal, but you're not too sure if this person can supply on time, if it's going to be up to your quality standards, if they're going to go bankrupt, if they're going to replace defects and so forth. So what this platform does is does that due diligence for each of the buyers and sellers on it. So our triangle again, in this case, the business application that we stood up, the marketplace, is also the issuer. And what they did was they actually proxy issue credentials on behalf of other organizations like Dun & Bradstreet, government databases, and so forth. So they're able to issue a credential. And in this case, the buyers and sellers are both the holders and verifiers of those credentials because they verify each other. Cool. And just so to kind of round off this section, I think, as I mentioned earlier, we often focus on the technical ability to provide trust, which is inherent in the infrastructure. But at the end of the day, you can't just tell a user that, hey, you just trust my system, it's built on the blockchain, like it's immutable and so on and so forth. You still need to kind of bridge that gap between the technology and the user. So what we did was go through a rigorous process to understand how we can do that. So some of these learnings that we had were that the onboarding itself created a lot of trust with these users. So having them go through a lot of verification, they were like, well, if I have to do all these checks, then I know that other people are going to have to do these things too. Making sure we had the right data, so showing the financial standing, the history of the company, their reputation and so forth was important. And even just like basic UX things. So it's amazing how much value you get just from putting a little certificate icon on a page, how much trust that gives a user. And yeah, that is it. So that is how you can stand up an SSI platform. So yeah, hopefully today was insightful for you. Apologies for the technical hiccups. I really enjoyed this conversation. Happy to take some questions if we have time. Sure.
Thanks, really interesting. One question, what is your opinion about creating this bridge between the physical product and the digital identity, the token? I mean, what kind of identifiers can be used and which are the most efficient right now, and how these identifiers can be really secure, like embedded in the product? For example, like chips, electronic tags, like that. Thanks.
Got it. So I think the first part of the question was how do you choose the identifiers to like validate and create that credential in the first place? So that still would happen, I guess you would call it manually. So for example, in the MIT example, you would go to the university and they would see your ID and they would then validate that you are who you say you are. And then from that point, then they can issue the credential. I think you also asked around like how does the credential become secure? Yeah, so basically once the credential is issued, it'll be stored in the user's wallet. And then, so there's always like a weak chain like in all of these scenarios, right? So as with like your hardware wallet or any other wallet, like the user still has to have, it has to be doing the right things in terms of best practices there, but everything is stored within that user's wallet. Cool. Yeah, hopefully that answered your question. Yep. Also for anyone, I'm happy to also have a deeper chat after this as well.
One more question. Thanks for the presentation, first of all.
Thank you.
My question is regarding the case with diamonds and like the fish and the more questions there. So I didn't really catch and understand how does the technology prove that in reality the origin of diamonds or the fish is like ecological or morally mined or whatever. Mm-hmm. So how does this really prove that in reality we can trust the certificate that, and the diamond is not a blood diamond and the fish is ecologically gathered?
Yeah,
Thanks.
no, it's a good question. So a lot of it comes down to the ability to track at each of those different points. Leveraging more technology to make it easier to capture data is like a first part. Using technology to detect when anomalies occur, to kind of make sure that we have like higher assurance in terms of the data that's being captured, and obviously storing it on the blockchain. We have trust that it's not being done by some third party in a government who can change the data, or someone can go in and start manipulating certificates and so forth. So, awesome. I think that is the end. I really appreciate it, and thank you for having me in your beautiful country.